Boker Tov, Russell.
Boker Tov.
Thank you for giving me your time. Really appreciate it. The audience don't realize it's 8 o'clock on Monday morning in London. Was it difficult to get in?
No, I'm an early starter. I'm
Yeah?
usually at my desk by 7, so don't worry.
All right, so I didn't get you out of bed.
No, I first came into the industry in, embarrassingly, 1974. That was formally when I started hotel school, but I've been working in my spare time in a fast food restaurant, or fast food as it was then, in the United Kingdom. HBS is a global hotel advisory group focusing primarily on the real estate aspects of the hospitality sector. We're a global firm, although we have our roots in America. And we now have some 30 offices around the world, mainly focused on things like valuation provisions, feasibility studies, advisory work. But we also get involved in executive search, which for you and me is headhunting. All sorts of specialists like casinos, spas, food and beverage, and the like. As well as hotel brokerage.
I'm assuming the hoteliers in the audience. This is direct to hoteliers, owners, and of course architectural conference. Can we start one of the topics you lectured on recently? You gave it a very interesting title. What's now? What's new? What's next?
As far as Israel is concerned, what's now is what every Israeli hotelier experiences, is the day-to-day hotel sector, how to make a profit when you cannot foresee if and when there will be some form of a disruption to the business, whether it's as a result of political or geopolitical activity or global concerns and so forth. And Israeli hoteliers have become very adept to being able to go with the flow and to react very quickly. I use the word nimble, which may not be understood, but I would use the word light on their feet, which means being able to react very quickly to changing circumstances. And as a result, I think Israeli hotels have been able to maintain a level of profitability where hoteliers around the world might not have been able to do so in similar circumstances. And you've only got to look at what's been happening as a result of the so-called Arab Spring. I think Israeli hotels over the years, hoteliers over the years, have taught themselves to be far more resilient. One of the aspects of Israeli hotels is that they're not sufficiently branded. And I would look to the future and say that one of the opportunities for Israeli hoteliers is to embrace more the international hotel brand. I know that hoteliers will say, well, they're expensive. Yes, they do cost. And they will say, well, what can they bring for me? What can they do that I can't do? And I think that one of the aspects of what a brand can do for an Israeli hotel is really to bring business in a more consistent fashion and at a slightly higher rate than would otherwise have been able to have been achieved. So if you can get more occupancy and if you can get more rate, and if the numbers work out that the cost of getting there, that the fees that you pay to an international brand are therefore covered, then there's an uplift to the bottom line, and consequently, there should be an uplift for the overall value of the hotel.
Boutique hotels are sprouting up like mushrooms in Tel Aviv. I don't know when you were last in Tel Aviv. I seem to walk past every second building is a boutique hotel.
Yeah, it's an international trend that is booming pretty well everywhere.
Boutique hotels.
And one of the attractions of boutique hotels is a relatively low cost of entry. When you're talking about major hotels and you're talking about 200, 300 rooms, that's a big check to write in order to get a hotel like that off the ground. But where we're talking about 40 or 50 rooms, where we're talking about the conversion of some existing residential blocks, for example, where we're talking about someone putting their all into development and really going back to innkeeping in its original format, where you have a mine host figure.
I'd like to shift just a minute about retrofitting, because that's what's interesting for me as an architect, and I'm sure a lot of architects in the audience. Retrofitting historical buildings is quite a complex procedure. Feasibility of retrofitting a building. There's certain buildings that are very easy. There's certain buildings that are very difficult. Do you do feasibility studies?
I mean, we're regularly asked to look at whether a particular hotel can work in an existing building. Sometimes those buildings have more history to them, and it's always a great pleasure to be able to see an old building that's fallen into disrepair, particularly where there are planning restrictions as to what can be done. And you actually see a new lease of life for that building as a result of a hotel being developed within it. I have to say retrofitting isn't necessarily the word I would always use, but in fact, what you're doing is you're bringing a new lease of life to an existing building, and the more historic that building, the more you can actually do with it in terms of creating a really authentic atmosphere for the hotel guests.
I think I use the word retrofitting more as well as sustainability and, you know, green systems into a building. Buildings that are, let's say, not built for green energy and so forth. We've had that at the American Colony, by the way, which a building we've just finished now is has a complete double pipe system of grey water reticulation, and we're doing a big reverse osmosis system to clean up that water, to bring it to the purity of drinking water. The cutoff point for the number of rooms is very complex in terms of feasibility, I assume.
It is, but it largely depends on who's going to operate it and whether there is going to be a brand applied to it.
Yeah.
If a hotel is going to be operated as a small independent boutique property, for example, you can make it quite small and still make decent money.
Yeah.
The problem is, at some point, the owner/operator is going to have a day off. And they can't work 24/7, and you need to have a certain critical mass to be able to afford the ability to hire enough staff to look after it when you're not going to be there. Restaurants and bars can make money, but the hotel business isn't as good as the restaurant business at making enough money. So and one of my encouragements to the hotel sector is really to focus on making money out of restaurants and bars, which traditionally we haven't done.
So
50 years ago, restaurants and hotels were the only places where people went out to eat.
Yeah.
And hotels have just sat back and watched the independent restaurant sector come and take away their business.
So if F&B becomes very important in the future.
It is. Every aspect of a hotel should be profitable.
Yeah.
Although you can make certain justifications. And one of the other trends that I'm encouraging hoteliers to think of is not just looking at occupancy and average room rate, and therefore RevPAR, rooms revenue per available room.
Yeah.
Also to look at profitability on a per available room basis. But to go even more beyond that and look at profitability per square meter. And
that's interesting.
You really do find out how much money you're making in certain parts of the hotel.
That's very interesting.
Or importantly, how much money you're losing in others.
That's very interesting. It's like, in architecture, how much does a square meter cost to build? Smart systems on a hotel. I've traveled around, looked at many hotels, and I asked JJ the question. I recently was at the Dol de Grand and Bel Air in Dol de Grand at Zurich, and the Bel Air, which they've just revamped in Los Angeles. And it was interesting, the smart systems in both hotels, when I asked the deputy manager to show me how they work, they both failed. What do you think of smart systems in new hotels?
The hotel business is still in the 19th century, never mind the 20th century, when it comes to technology and the ability to use technology. You and I both benefit from luxurious grey hair.
Yeah.
And perhaps at the wrong end of the age spectrum.
What do you see technology of the future in let's say, the new hotels, that looking from younger people's perspective?
I'm talking about self-check-in. We've got the technology already to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Room keys are an anachronism. We've all got a room key. We've got a wallet full of room keys. We just have to be able to understand how the technology needs to work in our favor. Most people are quite happy to use technology to check in for airports and aircraft. Why can't we use the same technology?
Because at the American colony, when we were working on a particular building that had historical significance, where the key was this side historically, eventually it sits on the wall, but it went through an evolution of that key to a smaller key with an electronic chip to a piece of plastic. But it took a long time in the design process with the management to give up on keys.
Like the American colony, you've also got hundreds, well, almost hundreds of years, certainly more than 100 years worth of history. Yeah. And having a nice brass key fob with a huge key on the end does have some nice connotations to it. And a friend of mine in the States is marketing a wooden key because it's greener to gain access to the room. Why can't we choose our room from the availability that's there?
That's really interesting for me. I mean, it's another perspective. But I'm going to take it back to the Stone Ages again. Because, you know, my kids are young kids. They don't really go to hotels. But I think now I'm going over to architecture, what I've noticed. In building materials, there's on the one hand something like titanium and so on. On the other hand, there's wood. Going back to your plastic, the keys made out of wood. I think there is a world trend, and I think that goes back to architecture, where people want to feel materials. They want to walk barefoot on the sand again.
I'll give you one very tangible example. So I got to my hotel. The first thing that they did when I'm on the speedboat between the airport and the island where I was staying, they took my shoes away and put them in a bag. And they said, "You'll have those back when you leave."
What would you have done if they took away your iPhone?
I would have probably had what's called a holiday.
I think on that, Russell, I know you're a very busy man. That was a great spontaneous chat.